If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Out of Bounds. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here talking golf after a three-hole aggregate playoff at the Players on this fine Monday morning. Nate, it was a little crispy down there, little chilly.
Yeah, 20-mile-an-hour winds gusting and 50 degrees. It didn't seem to be a problem for Rory McIlroy this morning, who gets the wind going in the aggregate playoff this morning. His 28th career PGA Tour victory, his second win at the Players. And Josh, when Rory stepped up on 16 this morning and pumps one 330 down the stripe, it felt like Rory had all the momentum going into it, and then he does that, hits an easy wedge onto the green and makes a relatively easy two-putt birdie, right? It just felt like he had all the momentum all the time.
He was in control the entire time, and, maybe for not any other reason than JJ just didn't really hit a good shot. He looked uncomfortable the entire time. He, 3 straight holes, and I'm trying to think back now, and I know we just got done watching it, but I'm trying to think of a good shot that he hit. And I know he said in his post round that, or in post playoff, I guess it would be, that tee shot on 17 that he hit was good. It was what he wanted to do. And he said, according to the TrackMan data they were getting on the range, that it was the right shot for the moment. It was the right number. He hit an 8-iron to a hole that was, I believe, playing about 130. But wind directly in their face off the lake. It was probably playing closer to 170, and he said it was the right number. I mean, it wasn't, but there wasn't any shot that I saw JJ Spaun hit that made me say he can go win this thing. I mean, even on 18, when Rory hits that drive where you called it the bailout to avoid the water, even if you wanted to say that was a real miss of his, JJ responds with an equal miss to the right, putting himself just completely out of play there.
Yeah, and I think it was pretty much over by then. All Rory had to do on the 18th tee was not hit it in the water. I think if he landed on land, it could have been behind a tree. It didn't matter because, he's only making double if he hits it in the water. He's not making double from the woods. He's going to make a pretty easy bogey. Or if not a par, there's a good chance that if he needs to, he can chip it out and still make a 4. But yeah. That shot on 17 by Spaun, he cut it in there. So, if it does hit the green, it's going to be pretty good. It was on the right line. And I think it was just adrenaline. I know he talked about that. He talked about how they were getting the right numbers on the TrackMan before the round, and it got a little warmer, and just a little bit. I knew it flew the green and went in the water on the fly, but I think just those two things. Just those two things with the adrenaline and just being a little warmer too, just blast it over the green, and Rory can pretty easily cover that one up for the win. It's pretty wild to see JJ hit that one that hard. He didn't. I think a lot of people are going to say he doesn't need an 8-iron, and that's for sure correct. Rory hit a 9-iron, and Rory hits it really far, but Rory hit it about 60% on that swing on the 17th tee. So I think Rory's playing a little bit of mind games too. JJ was really appalled, and you could really tell that JJ was like, "What is he hitting?" He looked over at the bag a few times, and that was interesting too as well.
Yeah, my thing with the 8-iron call, and I know maybe that was the right club by the numbers. But I think also give the course some credit here. That's a credit to how damn hard that hole is.
That's a really hard shot.
You just can't tell. It's wide open. You feel the wind, and who knows, maybe wind adjusted, it was 168, 170. But if you just catch a 10-second break in the breeze where it just subsides a little bit when the ball gets airborne, it can cut through. And I think that's kind of what we saw, which was the wind just didn't catch it, and it didn't even come close. He was even saying in his post round there that when it was in the air, he thought it was floating a little bit. And he was actually saying to himself, I hope it gets there. I hope it actually gets, because he thought it might come up short, apparently. I mean, it's just...
He had no idea where it was after he hit it, too. He was in dismay. He wasn't sure where it was. He kept asked a couple times, and someone I think his caddy told him it was in the water.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just an incredibly, incredibly tough hole. It's a good, it's on one hand, it's really exciting. I think it would have been more exciting if we had some extra daylight yesterday and we could have played these 3 holes last night as opposed to doing it today. Right. But, the weather, that's a hand you're dealt and you play it no matter what. So it is what it is. Do you have any concerns about that playoff format? I have to say, after watching it and having what was 12-hour buildup to this playoff today, not loving it personally.
Yeah, it does. It does suck when it can't be that night. I think they're kind of forced their hand. I will say, 3-hole aggregate is definitely better in my opinion than a 1-hole sudden death playoff. I think it's better. They play 72 holes for 4 days, and they're going to decide the tournament on a 1-hole kind of. I don't know if gimmick is the right word or randomness, right? So I think 3 holes is a good spot. I think there's not a lot of tournaments that do aggregate anymore. I think a couple of them are kind of going that way. So I think it's better than 1 hole.
Yeah, I guess I don't mind the aggregate. I think, to your point, it would have been better if it could have happened the same night of the event. When you're getting into the next day, it almost feels like,
yeah, definitely.
What
I think
are you
everyone
building up for? Like today, I guarantee you I was talking to some of my friends who are definitely not as big of golf fans as we are. And, they turned it off after the first playoff hole. You run the risk of having that sort of scenario play out. Whereas if it were sudden death, they could have gotten that in last night. They could have played 1 extra hole or 2 extra holes.
Yeah, that's true.
Before it got dark. So, do you have any love for the U.S. Open format or the U.S. Open style where it's 18 holes, just go at it a whole nother round of golf?
I think that's just a lot. I think that's just too much, right? I don't think they need to do that. Especially the next day as we get moving on the season, right? I don't think a lot of guys would be totally in favor. It's in Florida, so it's a little bit different. I guess people would be okay with playing that, especially with where golf is, where we are in the season, with Florida being that central location right now. I think that'd be interesting, but I think I would rather lean towards a shorter than that because, especially on a Monday too, I know a lot of the world is working, right? Especially corporate America, right? So I think it'd be tough on ratings. So I think the 3-hole kind of 9 o'clock, get it done by 10 and get out of there and get to the next week is the way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree there for sure. All right, let's talk about some non-winner stuff here. A lot of players this week came up and they showed out. They performed probably better than a lot of golf fans would have expected coming in. Another impressive showing for Akshay Bhatia, Lucas Glover, Danny Walker, a name that sort of came out of nowhere for a lot of people. Corey Connors, Bud Cauley, Robert McIntyre, all finishing in the top 10. Who out of those or what names were you watching on Saturday and Sunday and feeling good about seeing play well?
Definitely Akshay, because, on Saturday he comes in with the lead, right? He hits a tight on 1, makes birdie, then misses a short one at 2 for birdie, and then sort of unravels, right? But he's able to sort of salvage the round towards the end, only shoot a couple over par, and then Sunday morning comes out hot and gets himself in contention. So that's pretty impressive from Akshay. And I think, coming in the top 10, he's going to get a boatload of U.S. Ryder Cup points from this. And he's going to really firm his position, especially in a time when a lot of these U.S. guys are not playing their best golf, looking at you, Max Homa. I think it's really going to be interesting because I think Akshay is going to be a real contender to make this team. I don't even know if it's out of the question where Akshay could qualify as the top 6 best U.S. golfers at this point. I would be surprised.
If we're just talking about who's playing the most consistent golf on the American side so far this season, I don't think you can have a conversation about American players and not mention Bhatia.
Right. And another guy you can't mention is the captain. He made a hole-in-one yesterday, and he's been playing very good golf. So we could see a playing captain at the Ryder Cup, hypothetically.
At this point, seeing what we've seen,
it's not out of the question.
I feel like there's a pretty good chance that we see one or both of those players on the final Ryder Cup team.
I don't think he would pick himself, in that bottom 6. I don't think Keegan Bradley. I think he said that. I don't think he's going to pick himself. But there's a I think non-zero chance that he makes his team in the top 6.
Yeah, I mean it sort of depends on how the majors turn out because I think the majors,
Yeah, for sure. And we have a lot of time and a lot of big tournaments too, a lot of big spots for these guys. But just looking at it originally, I mean Keegan Bradley's been striping and he makes the only hole-in-one at the week at TPC. He's a big time player, right? We've known that. He likes the crowds and likes the noise. So I think it's realistic that we see him playing, not only caddying. I thought Kiz had a good comment on NBC the other day. He said, I hope Keegan doesn't make the team because that puts a lot of pressure on me, as the vice captain, right? So I thought that was funny. Kiz, by the way, a quick offshoot, does a great job with the broadcast. He's a home run hire for NBC.
Yeah, I have to say, it's interesting. I've been trying to identify the differences between a CBS broadcast and an NBC broadcast, and I have to say we're a couple weeks now into NBC carrying the weekend coverage, and I think I prefer it to CBS's, honestly.
Smiley does a great job too. I definitely, especially them two together on Friday afternoon when they do happy hour. I think that's a great job. They do a great job too together.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because we have more. NBC seems to be prioritizing recent players as their analysts, as their on-course guys. I think that makes a difference. Bones obviously is really good too.
Yeah, he's
you
awesome.
Get all these different voices, and it feels like a better broadcast. But like we've talked about before, the tour, I know they're trying some different things with sponsor integration and things like that to lessen the number of commercials long term, but the tour still has a lot of work to do on that front.
Yeah, I thought their coverage was good. I thought, there wasn't a lot of commercials towards the end, which was good.
Yeah.
Did you think that too?
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell week to week. I'll see some of the, call them golf sickos on Twitter, talk about, oh, this week has been a lot better, or this week is a lot worse. I have trouble noticing week to week because I just feel like I see the same number of golf shots, and you see, for me, certain things will stand out. Like once in a while, they were doing it on 17 quite a bit, and on one hand I understand, but on the other hand I'm saying, why spend 30, 40 seconds just showing a guy go through the process on the 17th hole? I get that they're trying to sell the fact that this is such a difficult golf hole, that it's very complex. But when most golf fans are just saying, show me more golf shots, I don't think it really does much to enhance the broadcast, showing these guys mulling over this 17th hole at the tee. I don't think it adds that much. And I saw that on Saturday. I saw it more on Saturday than I did on Sunday. But, those are the types of things that just stand out to me, and I don't necessarily notice as much. Was this week, did it feel, 10 or 20 or 30% better than the week before? I don't know. Are you able to notice those differences week to week?
Yeah, I noticed it now, definitely not, I'm not the best at it, but I definitely noticed there was less commercials with the players. And I think historically there usually is, and it's a pretty good broadcast, right? And I think it hurts NBC a little bit with how successful PGA Tour Live has been on ESPN Plus. I mean, they just show golf shot after golf shot after golf shot. Always have the morning coverage, and that's something that I watch pretty much week in and week out. Not even just the big tournaments. Thursday morning I'll turn it on and have it on in the background if I'm doing something. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I think they've done a really nice job, and I think NBC's gotten better. I think the players they have a little bit more leeway, right? Where they have a sponsor that's willing to let them sort of be on the golf course a little bit more. I think other tournaments aren't going to have as many eyeballs, so they're a little bit, I don't know if the right word I'm looking for here, but they're a little bit more sidetracked and not being able to show as much as they want to, right? Kind of hindered, right? By what they need to do. So I think that definitely plays a factor with the players having a lot more control on it. Yeah. So I think it's getting to a better spot for sure.
Well, there was lots of chatter about, better ways to integrate sponsors into the coverage. And I think this week, if I'm recalling the tweet correctly, I think I saw it this weekend where at some point they basically overlaid the sponsor on the edge of the tee box. And I think it was shown while Rory was teeing off, but a couple of screenshots made their way onto X, and I saw them there. And, that to me is one of the obvious methods. We're seeing all these hole by hole flyovers, everything like that. Figure out ways to incorporate. There's plenty of technology and design concepts out there to incorporate this branding onto the golf course so that you don't have to take a 30-second playing through or a 60-second playing through to show one or two commercials, instead of just getting their branding into the product itself.
Yeah, I agree there, and that's something that they've looked to the last few weeks. They've gotten a lot more creative as well. Do you have anything else on the broadcast before we get back to Rory? Could be the summer of Rory.
It could be. No, I don't have anything else. I think we're going in the right direction. I don't want to come off as like overly negative toward the broadcast versus where we were, a month or two ago. Play is speeding up. Yesterday was a bad example, I think, because we were in threesomes, so it felt like things were going really slow, but with that, I think we've been improving. So pace of play is getting better. I know they're going to start publishing that information. So players are going to start to play quicker no matter what, I think. But
yeah, that's a good point. I think that's something we should talk about too. They PGA Tour came out and said we're testing things on the Korn Ferry Tour in terms of pace and play.
yep,
So that's big. That's something
it's huge.
I think the PGA Tour is finally starting to think about it in a way where we have this bottom feeder league like baseball does. Why don't we test things down here? What have we been kind of waiting for, right? What's when the MLB introduced the pitch clock, it was used down in AAA, down in AA for years before it got implemented, right? So I think
Exactly.
let's do the same thing, and I think they're finally getting to that. And let's start as the joke is, let's start stroking guys, right? I think that's going to be where we might get to, and I think it's a good place to start on the Korn Ferry Tour. Let's teach these guys.
Yeah. Let's get back to Rory. I know you want to talk about potentially the summer of Rory, but I don't think the internet would let us get by saying or talking about Rory without mentioning the cell phone situation that
Oh yeah,
happened earlier in the week. He was heckled a little bit, walked over to what was actually a collegiate player, took the cell phone and walked down the fairway. I'm not exactly sure what happened to the cell phone after that,
I'm
but
not either.
Rory certainly took some heat. I think the assumption was that he deleted the video and then probably gave it to security to get it back to him. I'm assuming that guy got his phone back, but
I guess so.
he later apologized. What's your take on it? Because I think my instant reaction to it probably seems more critical of Rory than I actually am in my gut about how he reacted to it.
Yeah, I think we're going to be similar on this one. Then, that's just a really soft move by Rory. I mean, you got to have thicker skin than that, right? Because what's going to happen is, you show that you're going to react to things like this, and people are just going to give it to you more. Especially in a Ryder Cup year, and the Ryder Cup's in New York, right, where fans are ruthless. They're going to be on you, and I think Rory already knows that he's going to have thicker skin. I don't expect anything to happen like this at the Ryder Cup. But yeah, he's got to know that he's, if he deletes that video, sure, but there's 17 other videos that recorded him taking the phone away, right? And we have, and he's not going to be able to get every single phone and delete it off the internet. So I think he's just got to have thicker skin.
You know what? I think it was one of those situations where emotions got the best of him.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't even necessarily think he cared about deleting I think that was just like the narrative that the internet sort of assigned to it after it happened. I don't think he cared that much about deleting the video, but I'm looking at it kind of like this is Rory kind of making a villain move, I guess. Like he's sort of being a little,
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest, like listening to him in press conferences over the last several weeks, and then just sort of watching his body language at different times, I see a guy who just doesn't really give a damn anymore. Like,
right.
I think he's over what people think about him. I think he's sort of just operating for himself. And I think that's probably a good way to operate if you're Rory McIlroy, because you've put your neck on the line for the tour for going on 3 years now, and you don't really have a lot to show for it in terms of the things that you were defending with, the Saudi PIF and PGA Tour saga, where he was, put in an impossible situation because of the lack of leadership in the PGA Tour. I think we're just in that era where, frankly, I'm not even sure if he cares if he wins another golf tournament, because that was another one of the comments that didn't get as much attention, but to me really stood out and kind of went into the same basket of like, this is new Rory. Like, he talked about how he would approach the twilight of his career. And he said he didn't want to be out there embarrassing himself. And, he wanted to leave with a little bit left in the tank, I think was his exact phrasing. And, I see a guy who I don't think he cares that much if he wins another golf tournament or if he doesn't. And obviously he's still winning golf tournaments. So like he's there, he's good. But there's that level of like being at peace with your career, your life, and, being at peace with just making yourself happy. Maybe that's where he is now. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. And I think it's obviously worked, right? We've seen a total character switch from Rory in the last 3 years, right? Like we've seen with a lot of these PGA Tour players. He starts out as the poster boy for the PGA Tour, saying how much he loves LIV and all this, or how much he hates LIV, excuse me, and how much he hates these guys for doing this and hates everything about it. And then he sort of switches to, I got to get away from this because the winning's not happening. And then he starts winning and he goes through this divorce, right? And then now he's not getting divorced, and is he getting divorced kind of thing, and what's going on? And then the stuff with Balionis happens, right? And, he could be possibly seeing her, and, that, so just the things start happening and talking behind the back of Rory, but he just keeps on winning, right? He's already won twice this season, and we haven't even played a major yet. So, I mean, two high profile events too. So it's interesting for Rory. I think that not give a shit attitude has really, really, really worked for him. And I don't know, Josh, do you think, it's been over 10 years since we've seen Rory win a major. Is this the year?
So piggybacking right off of that, if there's going to be a mindset change that works and translates to a more dominant version of Rory McIlroy, it's the one we're watching now. So
yeah, for sure.
I'll say the table's set. I would not be surprised if he won one or two majors this year. I would not be surprised in the slightest. At the same time, if he doesn't, also wouldn't be surprised. I don't think he's it's so interesting because the majors are such a different ball game, not just because of who plays in them, but just because it's a completely different, every player has their own.
Yeah, it's a bugaboo for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Every player has their own, mental gymnastics they have to do to get in the right spot to win one of these things. And, he's got a lot to overcome, not just what happened last year, but 10 years worth of it. So, the question I was going to throw at you, could this be Rory's year to win 5, 6, maybe 7 times like Scottie Scheffler did last year?
Yeah, it could certainly be, but I don't know what to really think about Scottie because Scottie, comes off that off-season hand surgery trying to make ravioli over Christmas time. And Scottie hasn't played nearly his best golf, and he's sort of pedaled, right? And he's been not even that far off. He finished? I think he finished around 5 under, so he's not even that far off this week. And last week he was right around the same thing. But it's really interesting with Scottie because he hasn't shown us. He hasn't really. I don't know if the word contended is correct, right? He hasn't been in those last few groups, right? But he's been right there. So I think Scottie's ready to jump out, right? He's already won a couple times by this time last year. With the Players and ABI last year. So I don't know what to think of him, but yeah, Rory is certainly we could see a flip, in terms of Rory taking over like Scottie did last year and, kind of seeing that sort of switch, and Rory having a Scottie-like year and Scottie, Rory still won a couple times on tour last year. I know he won once actually and then won the Ryder Cup. But yeah, I think that could certainly happen where we see a switch at this point.
So I'm glad you brought up Scottie because I was looking through some stats and stuff this weekend, trying to figure out where the hell he is exactly. And last year he didn't win until I believe it was his 6th or 7th start. And this past week, I believe, was his 5th start. So the injury kind of put him behind a little bit. He mentioned, I believe it was after the Saturday round, that the putts that he was watching go in last year are, lipping out, edging out this year. So, there's a little bit of mojo change there, I think. But, I think these guys are such creatures of habit that I think their warm up, their tune up, we're watching them warm up or tune up in events. And I think they need those starts to really get where they, these world-class, these top-tier players, they need their starts to get where they are trying to go. So yeah, I would not be surprised at all if we see a different version of Scottie Scheffler within the next couple starts.
Yeah, look at Xander, too. I mean, Xander started the year on the DL, just like Scottie. And Xander's played okay. He's still fighting that, but just need to get those reps down. While we're talking about Scottie, I think we need to talk about Phil's comments, right?
Yeah, sure. The most unserious...
Phil went on X.com, the Everything app. Everything's happening on X. And he said, here's a hot take. Does Scottie win in 2025 before the Ryder Cup? I don't think so.
Okay.
Funny that Phil uses the 2025 Ryder Cup as a spot that Scottie could win before. I think that's really weird. I mean, yes, he's going to win. I don't think there's any question. I think even Phil doesn't believe this sentence. I think Phil really just wants to show up. A tweet, usually he's tweeting about Elon Musk and tweeting about how Donald Trump's doing a really great job and how Elon's doing a great job. But he took a break from that and tweeted a little bit about golf. Phil wanted to rile up the community. He also tweeted about Joaquin Niemann, about how he's, after winning, this week at Live Singapore, about how he's maybe the top 1 golfer in the world. I don't think that's true either. I don't think Phil even believes that's true either. Top 5, maybe. I think top 7, we could have that discussion if you want. I think the way Niemann's played over there has been pretty incredible. But yeah, what do you think about Phil? That's just weird, right?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it this way. We're seeing 2 versions of Phil Mickelson there. In the first tweet where he says, here's the hot take, does Scottie win before the Ryder Cup? I don't think so. That's Phil the entertainer. Phil is just trying to entertain.
Just trying to grasp onto any form of relevancy because it's all gone the last few years since he's joined Live.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it is what it is. Take it with a grain of salt. It is. No one will even remember that tweet in a week, which is part of the reason why it's just part of like the entertainment cycle that we see happening now. And then the other side of it, the Niemann tweet to me felt more like brand ambassador Phil. Like,
Yeah,
he's just,
and I don't necessarily have a problem with that one, to be honest.
He's carrying the company line, so to speak. Maybe he actually believes it, but at the end of the day, I'm so over listening to the people talk about, like, anyone talk about, well, this player is better, and if they only played in the other side, you would see that they were the best player. And from the PGA Tour side saying, Rory or whoever, they're all hypotheticals, they're all nonsense, they all mean nothing. It's just literally, it's part of that entertainment cycle, right? Like, it just drums up people debating something. Like, it's almost like it's like you're farming for clicks, basically, just to get, because he knew he could tweet that and it would get attention, and Barstool and all the other content platforms would go crazy on it. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone serious about trying to figure out who are the best players in the world is looking at X to determine who that is. Like, so if you want to use data golf, I saw a lot of people respond to that with, all right, like, let's look at data golf here and make a real decision. If you don't want to, go use OWGR, I get it. OWGR is toast. It's junk. It means nothing. But, to say Niemann is the best player in the world, with as bad as Scottie has played, if you want to call it that, the last month and a half, he's still the best player on the planet. He had a year unlike any.
Yeah, I don't think it's close even. Right.
And if you really want to, like, have a head scratcher moment, it was just a couple months ago that everyone was saying, Bryson DeChambeau is the one of the best players in the world, maybe two, maybe three, maybe he's number one, maybe he's better than Scottie. I haven't looked at the live standings lately, but I'm pretty sure he's not even in the top 25 individual standings over there. So, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we talking about with this stuff? So, and that the same can be said for guys like Cam Smith. We know Cam Smith is one of the 10 or 15 best players in the world. I'd even stay on the lower end of that, but I think he is actually close to the bottom of the live individual season standings.
Yeah, I would like to see Cam Smith contend in a major again since he's gone to live. I think he played well at the Masters that first year, and that's about it.
Yeah.
He won that Open Championship where he went just bananas on Rory McIlroy at St. Andrews and then left for live. But yeah, Josh, I think it's good on the Phil side because Joaquin Niemann is by far their best young player on live. I mean, Cam Smith and Bryson DeChambeau are over 30. I'm talking about under 30. Joaquin Niemann, I don't think it really is. I think he's the highest on the pedestal, right? In terms of, I mean, I guess you could talk about Taylor Gooch a little bit, but that seemed to have dissipated a little bit. It's Joaquin Niemann far and away. What's he in data golf? Do you have it up?
I don't, but another argument there, I guess, that you could make as well is, like, I wouldn't even consider Niemann the best player in live. Would you?
No, it's Bryson. Bryson's the best player on live.
It's Bryson. It's probably Rahm. Like, right? Like, there's other guys. So according to Data
Brooks
Golf,
has won a million times over there. So it's he's up there. He's won a bunch of times there.
Data Golf has Niemann at 14, DeChambeau at 15. And they're the two. Well, Rahm, they have Rahm at 5. So there's your top. They also have Hatton at, looks like, 10. So there you go. There's your technically your 4 best guys. Koepka is, boy, he's down.
Data golf's not perfect in some senses, but it's definitely better than OWGR. Like you said, OWGR is obsolete.
Yeah, I mean, it's until we have, and I'll go
right.
I'll die on
it's
this,
still pretty good.
Until we have all of these guys playing in the same set of tournaments every year, which is the standard by which every metric has been run in the history of golf. Everyone's been playing the same set of tournaments. Until we get back to that point, it's never going to make sense. Like, it's never going to be right per se, right? Like, so I don't know. Like, I just look at this as you can make an argument for a bunch of guys being the best player or among the best players in the world. But at the end of the day, Scottie Scheffler is the best player in the world, not only because of the results that he had, but because of the ball striking performance that he had in 2024. That alone, the run that he was on with strokes gained and ball striking between 2023 and 2024 was Tiger-esque in his prime. And, you would think that would be something Phil would be able to recognize, but he's an entertainer now. He's not as much a contending professional player. We need to talk about the elephant in the room, though. If we're going to talk about the best players in the world, I think we also need to talk about the guys that maybe aren't among the best in the world anymore. So players that missed the cut this week: Justin Rose, Hideki Matsuyama, Sam Burns, Adam Scott, Ludwig, Viktor Hovland, Brian Harman, Matt Fitzpatrick, Max Homa, Tony Finau, Wyndham Clark withdrew. There were a lot of guys who, we've kind of been talking about offline the last, 3 weeks, trying to figure out when they're going to get it going, where they're going to be. Obviously, I did a lot of talking leading up to Bay Hill because I thought it was preposterous that Jordan Spieth didn't get a sponsor's invite into that event. But who did you see this past weekend that you're starting to have some big concerns about?
I mean, Max Homa's easy answer. I think, it's really concerning. I'm starting to get concerned for Viktor Hovland. I don't know what's happened to him. He won the FedEx Cup, and then he seemed like he was coming back a little bit a couple years ago, and he's just nothing. I mean, we saw firsthand in the PGA Championship, he's one stroke out of the lead and buries that one in the bunker. I mean, on the 71st hole, he's right there. So it's interesting to me. Matt Fitzpatrick came out after, and he's parting ways with his caddy. He's been with him pretty much his whole pro career. Won the U.S. Open with him, so that's gonna be really interesting. Where's Matt Fitzpatrick kind of going as we get into the meat of the season? Who is he gonna have on his bag? I think that's really, really interesting story, especially in a Ryder Cup year. So we'll see what Matt can happen. But yeah, Max Homa, just I don't know where he is. He's in his own head, it seems like, and I'm hoping and praying that he figures this thing out. But he's running out of time.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you start to think about guys that, maybe won't be in the elevated events next year, are you concerned about any of those guys toward the bottom just not even getting into the mix?
I'd be concerned for Max Homa. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, he's fallen.
No question about it.
So far, so fast. And, when you start to look at it and you start to,
he would get sponsors invites though, so he's probably fine.
Yeah, but you know what? It's interesting because maybe he would for a year, but he's a bit older. He's not in his 20s, and he was a bit of a late bloomer to begin with, if I recall correctly. You wonder if he's going to be able to get it back and get back into the top tier events. We've seen some guys do it. Obviously, Ricky.
Wow, he's dropped to 70th in the world. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. He dropped to 70th in the world.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, I mean,
in an OWGR, which is obsolete, right? We've talked about. Wow.
I would be very interested to even see where he sits in data golf though too, because that's another
further down.
He's probably even further down in that.
Definitely, yeah.
But to me, it's more the concern for me. Yeah, so data golf has him at 144.
Yeah, for sure.
So I look at it as, and he's 146 in the FedEx Cup standings right now. The challenge for him, and it can all change in a week, right? But every week he's having these 78, 80, 82. He is putting up big numbers consistently. And I feel like when that starts to happen, it really shows just how far away you are from that, that peak performance of where you're in contention. He's nowhere near being able to contend in a golf tournament right now if we're going off of, what he's shooting week in and week out, right?
Yeah, he hasn't even really scared the cut line. And in the Century, I think he made it pretty close on the number, and I think he was close to that number at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. I mean, he was 50th, tied 53rd, T26 at the Century, and that's his best finish. He doesn't have a top 25 this year. He's got way more missed cuts than made cuts, so it's interesting for Max. And I'm hoping and praying that he figures it out, because he's a really, really good Ryder Cupper. He's built for that sort of stage, right? And when he's striping it, we saw him play very well in Rome. He's a guy that feeds off the crowd, right? So I think the U.S. is going to need him to figure it out. I mean, they can't pick him right now, that's for sure. So I think it's going to put Keegan Bradley in a really tough spot. Say Max Homa starts to play a little bit better, if he plays a little bit better, he makes some cuts. It's going to be really hard for Keegan Bradley to sort of make it. So I think Max needs to make this easy on Keegan Bradley. Just play well just play solid the rest of the year. I don't even think he needs to win to get on the team. I think if he just plays solid and has some top 10 finishes, couple top 10 finishes, I think he could take some.
I want to throw a scenario at you because I just looked at the Ryder Cup standings right now, the Ryder Cup point standing, and Max Homa is at 29, just behind Akshay Bhatia.
That's probably not updated yet. Bhatia is going to move way up with the points that he got this week.
But, it's one of those situations where, like, they shouldn't even be
right.
They shouldn't have even been within sniffing distance of each other, 2 weeks ago. This looks like it was put out on the 9th of this month. So it's like 7-8 days old. I mean, it's one of the things that has consistently frustrated me with professional golf is, like, I don't know if it's because of the FedEx Cup system and signature event system and how much it prioritizes guys who won, a year or two ago. But my word, like, those two players could not be on different tracks, more different tracks at this point. Like, it's incredible to me that Max, after really not doing anything good in about 2 years, is still in the top 30. Like, that to me is just inexcusable. And I hope for the American sake that it gets figured out because, the U.S. team is going to have to be stout and strong. And I think they're going to have to take some gambles on younger guys if they want to even have a chance at contending against a European team that is going to come to play because they do every time.
Yeah, and I think they're just totally different, right? The European team doesn't need form. I mean, they could take pretty much virtually the same team as Luke Donald took last time. I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes. And it doesn't really matter how they're playing. I mean, you could look at a guy like Matt Fitzpatrick who isn't playing his best golf, but he'll show up at the Ryder Cup and play. I mean, this European style is totally different from the American style. They feed off camaraderie, they feed off each other, and they feed off the moment, right? And I think the Americans look at it a little bit more individually throughout the season, and so that plays a huge factor. I think form isn't nearly as important for the European side.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Topic here before we get out: TGL playoffs. They start tonight on ESPN. Is it a 7:00 or 9:00 start, Nate?
7:00 tonight in New York versus LA in the first one. 7:00 tomorrow night as the Bay plays Atlanta tomorrow night. And then next week, I think they play a 3-match sort of series for the finals. And I think the first one on Monday night is at 9:00 for some reason, and then Tuesday 7:00, and then if necessary, they play that third match at, you guessed it, 9:00 for the time. So I think you're ready for some more golf. We watched some golf this morning here on a Monday, and we got some more golf this evening. Who could ask for anything better, right, on this St. Patrick's Day, right?
Piles of. I just want to drop in one, I guess, little change I'd like to potentially see in next year's version of TGL. I would like to see try matches. I don't know how exactly it would. I don't know exactly how they'd execute that, but I really
high school golf does it. Why can't TGL?
Yeah, like, why can't you because I just think introducing one more team, especially with how quick it moves anyway, would just make it so much more interesting and eliminate the scenario of we've seen a couple blowouts this year on TGL where it's not that interesting. Right. Get a third team in there and all of a sudden change the dynamic of everything.
We talked about how the TGL is going to expand. They pretty much announced that already. They didn't announce it themselves, but that we know that's going to happen next year.
Yeah.
Do you have a team in mind that you'd like to see, or maybe some guys that can make up a team, or even a couple players?
I mean, we need Scottie Scheffler.
I think Texas is a slam dunk. They put a team in Austin, they put Jordan Spieth and Scottie Scheffler on it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it just, to me, because of the relationships that those two guys that you just mentioned already have with a bunch of the players that are in the mix, to me, that seems like the most obvious. I think it would also make sense because there's 5 teams right now, right?
Yeah.
You minimally got to get to 6. We need to get to 6 so that we have even numbers.
Maybe there is 6. But yeah, I think a team in Austin, and make them orange like the college, right? You can't call them the Longhorns, obviously, but just sort of get them in there like that. I think it can fill with 2 guys. They don't necessarily, other 2 guys don't need to be from Texas. You see Europeans on all these teams, so they don't need to be from the city, right? So I think that's an easy way to go for the PGA Tour or for TGL in that factor.
Give us an international team. Give us London.
Yeah, why not? They play. I mean, they obviously don't play out of their city, so it doesn't matter. It matters a little bit where they're from, but what really matters is who's backing up the team with the money, right? Is Uncle Steve coming in for a New York team, or who's coming in for it? So I think, Akshay is a good guy we've talked about that needs to be on a team, right? So let's get him in there as well.
Yeah.
Tony Finau did a really good job in his free agent showing a couple weeks ago on Atlanta. So I think he would be a good fit for it too. He seems like he has a good spot for, being fun and interactive. So
yeah. I think we also need to see a rule before next year on who can be signed to these one-day contracts. That's a little bit crazy. Kind of takes the seriousness out of it, not having in most sports we have trade deadlines and things like that. I think they need to put some rules around who can be signed or create a pool before the season starts.
Yeah, gotta have a free agent pool for sure.
And maybe some kind of waiver system where you got to pick a player up off waivers, and I don't know, something to
Hope
make.
Tony Finau got paid for that. Hope he got a lot of money. That's for sure.
I hope he did too for the 2 hours.
I'm sure he did.
2 hours of work.
Really, a lot of mouths to feed in the Finau family. They do Elena does a great job on TikTok documenting everything. There's a bunch of good wags in golf that do a great job with that.
Also, not to be understated, whole family travels together every week. That is
it's pretty cool.
It's an effort. That is a serious effort to move an entire family like that week in and week out. Hey, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. Check us out on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Substack for more in-between episodes. And until next time, you guys know the drill. Whether it's down the middle, in the pond, or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.